I just want to give a big plug for our Friday night service. I was really thrilled with the music last night and the energy of that service. Even last week's Friday night service that we're conducting through Zoom and through YouTube got over 150 views. That's a service that at our shul we sometimes struggle to get 1 million in this time of year. So if you haven't checked out the Friday night service, we do it before Shabbat, but it's actually online to watch forever on our YouTube channel. If you're not doing anything Friday afternoon before Shabbat and you want to join us in a really inspiring musical entrance to Shabbat with a guitar player and a pianist and Tibby's voice and a little Dvar Torah, I think this is one of the great service-related programs that's come out of the difficulty of the time we're living in. So please do join us. Every week it's a different time, but if you're getting our emails on Friday morning, the Manishma email on Friday morning, you'll be able to see what time the service will be live. Well, I want to talk this morning about liars and lying. Everything I just said now was the truth, but now let's move to exaggeration and lying. Where in the Torah does it say that lying is prohibited? Where in the Torah does it say that we are forbidden to lie? The Torah definitely has commandments against bearing false witness, has commandments against giving false testimony. It warns us that we're not allowed to harm people by deceiving them. That's not allowed. But it might surprise you to learn that actually there is no place in the Torah where it says that we're forbidden to lie. Actually, there's nowhere in the Mishnah or the Talmud either. Nowhere that it says where it says it's forbidden to lie. Actually, it says sometimes lying is a very important thing to do. And I don't know if you noticed during the Torah reading, but in the Torah reading this morning, even God lies. When did it happen? Well, the three messengers, remember the story at the beginning, the first Aliyah, they come to Abraham and Sarah's tent, and one of them announces, verse 10, I will return to you next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son. The angel was talking to Abraham. Sarah was listening outside from outside the tent, and she hears this, and she laughs. And the Torah says what she was laughing about. Now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment, and with my husband so old? Sarah, it seems, had a chuckle over the idea that her husband would be able to perform and father a son for her. It's not such a crazy thing to laugh about. Abraham is 99 years old when this happens. God hears Sarah's laughter, understands why she's laughing, and seems to get upset and goes to Abraham and confronts Abraham with Sarah's laughter. But the words, pay close attention to what God says to Abraham. God's words are not accurate representations of what Sarah was laughing about. God says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Now that I, Sarah, am old. Now notice the little lie that God tells. Sarah was not laughing about how old she was. She was laughing about how old he was. But God decided to bend the truth a little bit, to spare Abraham the shame of learning that his wife was sort of making fun of him for being so old. The Midrash notices this. Bar Kapara comments on this scene and says, you see, great is peace, for even God twisted the truth in order to preserve peace between Abraham and Sarah. In other words, for Bar Kapara, this scene proves that peace in Judaism is a greater value than truth. And that may be true in this case. God's little white lie didn't hurt anybody really, didn't do any harm to Abraham and Sarah, and actually prevented resentment and hurt feelings. This, by the way, is related in another famous argument in the Talmud in Tractate Ketubot. You may know about the famous tractate of the ugly bride. The rabbis actually have a debate in Masechet Ketubot about what you're supposed to say to an ugly bride. And we follow the view of Hillel, who says even if the ugliest bride in the world is sitting in front of you, you say to her and you dance, Kala nai v'chasuda. What a beautiful and graceful bride. Because a lie can sometimes be a blessing. A few years back, my friend's grandmother, who was very old, she was suffering from terrible dementia. And she would ask all the time about her husband. If someone told her the truth, that he had died, she would burst into tears, inconsolable weeping. Every time she asked the question and she heard the truthful answer, it was as if she was hearing the news for the first time ever. So this friend was telling me about this and saying it was so terrible to witness this. It would sometimes happen multiple times in a day. So the family decided that it would be okay to just spare her the truth. When she asked, "How is Merv doing?" they would just say, "Merv is doing fine. He's all right." In other words, they would lie. And through that lie, the family could sleep more peacefully. Now, could there be a commandment against that? Against lying in a situation like that? Seems to me they were fulfilling a different commandment. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You treat another person, you love them, you do for them what you would want done if you were in the same situation. Love your neighbor as yourself. So you might get the sense from all of these sources that there's nothing wrong with lying. But if I said that, then I would be lying. In Judaism, it all depends on what is motivating your lie. And if you're not lying to benefit somebody else, chances are it would fall under an unforgivable, inexcusable category in Jewish law. There are lies, for instance, that are told to help nobody else except yourself. Lies that are meant to give you some advantage at work or in relationships. This is called genevat da'at, deception. Telling someone that the purse that you're selling them is real when it's actually a fake. Telling somebody that the picture on your dating profile is a recent picture when it's actually from 10 years ago. You're stealing from somebody. Isn't that interesting? Jewish law classifies that kind of deception as theft because you're stealing someone else's ability to make an informed decision. That's not allowed. And then there is another kind of lie that is perhaps the worst of all. Those are lies that are told not just to give ourselves some advantage, but are actually also going to hurt somebody else. A lie that is going to disparage. These lies are really cruel because you're not just hurting a person in your eyes, you're hurting them in the eyes of others. You're destroying their reputation. Slander. lies told to humiliate somebody, to make them look stupid or foolish or small. We learn that such lies not only can be said of a person that you want to disparage, but also a thing, a system, an institution. If you will use lies to delegitimize it, that falls under the category of slander. This is called, in Hebrew, motzi shem ra, ruining someone's or something's reputation. The worst type of lie at all, that it seems to me is being repeated over and over again in the context of a very consequential American election. Like many of you, I'm guessing, I've also been watching the coverage, watching it because, as crazy as it all is, it is fascinating. Never seen anything like this in my lifetime. The circumstances of the election, the tremendous division, it's really unprecedented. When the truth is, probably that's just my myopic view, and there is very little about the circumstances that are unprecedented. Global epidemics have happened before, just not in my lifetime. Racial tensions, disrespectful debate, protests, recounts, narcissistic politicians, I guess we are used to that. I saw in an article forwarded to me earlier this week that Canadian elections in the 19th century was very common for them to be marred by violence. People have always been passionate about their beliefs, and humanity is always going to face many disruptions. These problems aren't going to go away, no matter who is elected. But there is something about this election that does seem to me quite unprecedented, not just in my lifetime, but beyond. Can we at least agree, no matter how we identify politically, that truth must be a foundation for every democracy? Can we at least agree that there are some lies that are never, ever justified? Malicious lying by our leaders, we've seen it before, but in free countries, these are only unprecedented because we've been seeing them in places like North Korea and Saudi Arabia and Cote d'Ivoire and Russia, places where conspiracy theories get played up in order to advantage some and hurt others. It's what we saw 8 decades ago in Germany. Kristallnacht is being commemorated this week. So is Remembrance Day. Don't we tell ourselves never to forget? Well, let's not forget that in fascist countries, the truth is enemy number one. The truth is the enemy. The truth gets in the way of the spreading of hateful, radical ideologies. Ideologies like these need mistrust in order to be influential. But our democracies, our free countries are not so. They are supposed to be built on foundations of openness, of transparency, of sincerity. Free countries gain influence because they strengthen trust, just the opposite. They strengthen trust between the individual and his or her government. Those very foundations are under threat. They are under threat right now. One of the things we know about lying is that the more we lie, the easier it is to lie. And the more we lie, the more likely we are to lie again. How far have we, friends, descended down that rabbit hole? Not just in the United States, but in many other democracies. I believe we have come to expect politicians and other leaders to make up ridiculous assertions and claims when negative stories come out about them. We expect it. The idea that anyone would have the honor to admit a wrongdoing, to concede defeat, to come clean about their financial history when there are inconsistencies, that's almost preposterous. That is not the time we are living in. We must always be on guard for the integrity of our freedoms. That is why in Europe they are standing up to Islamo-fascists who do not believe in freedom of expression. The French people understand how dangerous censorship can be. Censorship is the best tool available for liars. So all of us should be standing shoulder to shoulder with them as they fight to protect their values from the assaults of terrorists who do desecrate God's name by saying they are on God's side. They are not. But getting back to the current drama, if we are going to stand shoulder to shoulder with France and with Vienna and with Europe, then we also need to stand for those who are fighting for the truth south of the border. The malicious lies about the integrity of the United States election, they are about Hotza'at Shem Ra. They are designed to destroy the reputation of a process, and they are wholly unsubstantiated claims. It is not my job to wade into politics, especially those of a foreign country. But there is a certain point, I believe, when rabbis and other religious leaders have to risk angering some people because there are core faith values that are under attack. I am not up to date. I haven't seen this morning what the results are with regards to the U.S. election. But even before Shabbat yesterday, it seemed to me to be rather over and done. So I think it should be said clearly and succinctly to President Trump, this is over. It's done. The lies have to stop. You lost in a fair contest, and it is time to concede defeat. Pack your bags and get out of office. We who live in free countries have to fight for our political beliefs, no matter what they are. We have to be people of conviction. I respect people on the left, on the right, in the center, as long as they are firmly held beliefs, held with integrity. You deserve our respect. But I think we have a deeper responsibility to fight for the institutions, don't we, that allow those beliefs to become realized. That is what is under attack right now from the president and many in his circle. The Torah says, Shotrim v'shotrim titen lecha. You have to have judges and officers to protect your institutions. It all starts from there. And the sages say, who are those judges and officers? They are you. The responsibility is ours, the public's. It is our responsibility to protect them. Yes, everybody lies, and not all lies are bad. But the appallingly malicious lies being heard today are unprecedented in their recklessness. They are baseless claims being put out to distort and destroy democracy, egregious falsehoods, smears designed to delegitimize institutions and threaten the integrity of an entire system. And worst of all, they are an attempt to throw an entire nation into chaos and violence so that one man and one administration can hold on to power. It is unacceptable, and we will not stand for it. Let it be said of us that when the time came to draw a line, to distinguish between good and bad, between right and wrong, between truth and falsehood, that we did not sit and equivocate like much of the media is doing. And let us learn ourselves from what is going on, personally and for our own Canadian institutions. Some lies cannot ever be tolerated, or they do get worse and worse and worse and worse until disaster. And I pray to God that we are not heading towards a disaster in the United States. It will only take good and moral people on both sides of the aisle to put the best interests of the country first in order to prevent what I think is going on. We have to stop lying to this ugly bride and tell her the wedding is over. May God give us the strength and conviction to fight for our principles and our institutions, to preserve the freedom that we must not just honor by the pins that we wear on our jackets, but by the voice and the power that God has given us, to protect those freedoms and to secure a better future for all of us. Shabbat Shalom.